One thing he's clearly doing is changing the subject from a different form of crime, which is child sex trafficking, which Jeffrey Epstein was a mastermind of. Donald Trump's name apparently appears throughout the Epstein file.
They've arraigned a Democratic member for taking a phone call from her constituent, Jeffrey Epstein, in the middle of a hearing. I still don't see what the charge is. Where is the ethical transgression?
Imagine how this would have gone if Trump had been taking phone calls from Jeffrey Epstein, if there was any evidence of Trump taking phone calls from Jeffrey Epstein. Look at this Truth Social thing. I'm not even going to read the whole thing. He just put it up about Epstein. So Trump yesterday signed the bill from Congress to simply release all the Epstein documents, right? So for months now, anytime there was any discussion about Trump, it could be on the Alien Enemies Act, it could be on tariffs, it could be on anything. The left would say, yeah, but what about Epstein? What about Epstein? What about Epstein? And now Trump has signed the release. All the Epstein stuff, you got it all. You got it all. And it turns out that who's implicated in all these documents? Not Trump. Not Trump. The Democrats will tell you that Trump appears in these documents like 1,600 times, but it's never Trump. It's people talking about Trump. Trump's not in these documents. There's no email. There's no text. There's no communication between him and Epstein in these documents. You know who there is communication between? Epstein and a lot of Democrats. I'll just read a little bit of this. I know it's too small for you to see. Jeffrey Epstein, Donald Trump writes, who was charged by the Trump Justice Department in 2019, not charged by Democrats, charged by Trump. He was a lifelong Democrat, donated thousands of dollars to Democrat politicians, was deeply associated with many well-known Democrat figures such as Bill Clinton, who traveled on Epstein's plane 26 times, Larry Summers, former president and current professor at Harvard University, sleazebag political activist Reid Hoffman, minority leader Hakeem Jeffries, who asked Epstein to donate to his political campaign after Epstein had been charged with PDF nonsense by the Department of Justice, Democrat Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett, who was receiving text messages from Epstein as she was engaged in questioning of people in the BS allegations of Trump misconduct over Russia, and many more. Perhaps the truth about these Democrats and their association with Jeffrey Epstein will soon be revealed, because I have just signed I have just signed the bill to release the Epstein files, so they're all being released. And it's a giant boomerang effect, the biggest backfire in political history, arguably. Newly released campaign finance records show that from 1990 to 2018, the year before he was indicted by Trump, Jeffrey Epstein directed about 90% of his political donations to Democrats and progressive causes, notably individual recipients including Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Chuck Schumer. And so the Democrats have been screaming about the Epstein files as if their release was going to hurt Trump, which of course is insane, because these Epstein files were in possession of the Biden administration the entire 4 years of the Biden administration. We're supposed to believe there was information in there damaging the Trump, and Biden never released it. The Democrat Party that sought insurrection against our democratically elected president through the Russia hoax and other means, spying, wiretapping our senators. Those guys, they were going to decline to leak information from the Epstein report if it was harmful to Trump. Obvious nonsense. But they acted like that. Look how differently they talk about Epstein material when they thought it would hurt Trump, and how they talk about it now when it's obviously damaging instead to them. In this particular case, Congresswoman Plaskett, who was texting with Epstein during congressional hearings. Check this out. And this, of course, is another Congressman Raskin, Jamie Raskin.
One thing he's clearly doing is changing the subject from a different form of crime, which is child sex trafficking, which Jeffrey Epstein was a mastermind of. Donald Trump's name apparently appears throughout the Epstein file.
They've arraigned a Democratic member for taking a phone call from her constituent, Jeffrey Epstein in the middle of a hearing. I still don't see what the charge is. Where is the ethical transgression?
Imagine how this would have gone if Trump had been taking phone calls from Jeffrey Epstein, if there was any evidence of Trump taking phone calls from Jeffrey Epstein. By the way, Jeffrey Epstein would have been Trump's constituent too, right? Everybody, every American in the nation is a constituent of the president. And this is also so funny. Jasmine Crockett, whose congressional district got obliterated by the new Texas 2025 map, she was reading in Congress yesterday that Lee Zeldin, a prominent Republican congressman, took money from Jeffrey Epstein. She's reading off a document. Look at this. Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin, he took money from Jeffrey Epstein, but the money was from a completely different Jeffrey Epstein. It was from a physician, and the money was received after the PDF Jeffrey Epstein was dead. She just didn't know what the hell she was talking about. I'm not going to play this whole thing. I just realized it's 5 minutes, but let's see if we can get a gist of it in 30 seconds or a minute.
Democrat who's been on defense over Jeffrey Epstein is Stacey Plaskett. She represents the Virgin Islands. She was texting with Jeffrey Epstein the day of Michael Cohen's hearing. Her questions pretty closely followed the text messages between the two of them to ask about Rona Graff, Trump's long.
So Epstein was telling Democrat Congresswoman Plaskett what questions to ask in the hearing.
Time assistant. You were defending her today or in recent days, yesterday, and you talked about Republicans taking money from a Jeffrey Epstein. Here's what you said.
Who also took money from somebody named Jeffrey Epstein, as I had my team dig in very quickly. She went to a very expensive private school, by the way. So she doesn't,
I've seen interviews from her before she was a congresswoman. She just speaks normal English. But when she wants to be angry, she adopts this ghetto dialect nonsense. By the way, the woman on the right here is Plaskett, who is taking guidance on Jeffrey Epstein, the PDF monster, during congressional hearings, so she would know what questions to ask. Represents the Virgin Islands, by the way. Not really a real congresswoman. Anyway, here's ghetto Jasmine Crockett.
Mitt Romney, the NRCC, Lee Zeldin, George Bush, Win Red, McCain Palin, Rick Lazio.
You mentioned Lee Zeldin there. He's now a cabinet secretary. He responded and said it was actually Dr. Jeffrey Epstein, who's a doctor that doesn't have any relation to the convicted sex trafficker. Unfortunate for that doctor, but that is who donated to a prior campaign of his. Do you want to correct the record on the people that?
Listen, I never said that it was that Jeffrey Epstein.
She's like the perfect Democrat. She's completely shameless. I never said it was the PDF Jeffrey Epstein.
So that people understand when you make a donation, your picture is not there. And because they decided to spring this on us in real time, I wanted the Republicans to think about what could potentially happen, because I knew that they didn't even try to go through the FEC. So my team, what they did is they Googled. And that is specifically why I said
They Googled. Oh my God, she may as well be retarded. And I don't know why it's so often. So obviously, Jasmine Crockett's a black woman. If she likes to wear black these days because it covers up but it's almost a stereotype at this point, right? We have Letitia James being prosecuted for mortgage fraud. We have the woman on the Lisa, what's her name, on the Federal Reserve Board. What was her offense? Is it also mortgage fraud? Now we have this woman, Democrat Congresswoman Sheila Cherfilas McCormick, just charged by the Department of Justice with stealing $5 million in FEMA funds meant for disaster relief. She's looking at 53 years in prison. You make your own judgment. On that. So I don't know what's going on. Is there a pattern? It seems like there's a pattern. Lindsey Halligan is the by profession and training an insurance lawyer. She did some legal work for President Trump personally. And then when it became clear that the Eastern District of Virginia U.S. Attorney's Office was not going to prosecute James Comey, was going to let the statute of limitations expire, Trump fired that guy who said there was no evidence to support an indictment and prosecution of Comey, and put in Lindsey Halligan, who in a 2 or 3 day period looked at the evidence and said there's plenty here, and put it in front of a grand jury and secured an indictment. And now the defenders of Comey's lawyered up, of course, his defenders and this magistrate judge. So what we're dealing with here is a federal judge who's not a real federal judge, not a full-blown federal judge with a lifetime appointment. It's what you might think of as a junior federal judge, a magistrate judge who's dealing with things before you get to the trial level, like this indictment, would deal with things like bail, stuff like that. This magistrate judge is also very aggressively attacking the integrity of this indictment in a way I've never seen before. Normally, folks, you've all heard the expression, even a ham sandwich can get indicted. And I've seen plenty of questionable indictments, plenty of them, where you just look at it and you're like, if you're familiar with the actual evidence in the case, you're like, well, this is bullshit. This is just lying. And the grand jury really only hears from the prosecution. So it's just not hard to secure an indictment. And once you have one, they're not often challenged, and they're very resilient to challenge. So usually a magistrate judge might hear a challenge and just say, yeah, no, we're not doing that. We're just going forward with the indictment, make these arguments a trial. You always try to get the indictment thrown out, but it never works. Except here, the magistrate judge, almost certainly a progressive fascist activist judge, is working night and day to try to find reasons to throw out this indictment. And U.S. Attorney Lindsey Halligan, of course, is fighting back. Right now, some of the argument is it's silly. It's total misrepresentation. So the magistrate judge is saying, hey, you went before the grand jury. They indicted on one charge. They indicted on a second count. They declined to indict on a third count. So you got 2 out of 3. And then what Lindsey Halligan did, the grand jury was leaving. They had indicted on count 1, indicted on count 2, declined to indict on count 3. And these were separate physical pieces of paper, documents. So Lindsey Halligan took the count 1 and the count 2 and put them in a single document. They had been indicted, put them in a single document, and brought that single document back to the grand jury foreman, who was still in the courthouse, and just had the foreman sign that these were the indictments. And this magistrate judge is trying to say, well, that's unlawful because the grand jury had already left the courtroom. The grand jury as a whole did not look at that piece of paper that had count 1 and count 2 combined. It doesn't matter. They looked at count 1 and they indicted. They looked at count 2 and they indicted. All she did was copy and paste them into a single document for purposes of convenience. And she left off the count in the single document. She left off count 3 because they declined to indict there. So this is all nonsense. But it's another example of these activist judges. And a magistrate judge is doesn't need impeachment to remove. They have a limited term. I think it's 10 years, but could be impeached. Obviously, these are shenanigans taking place. Another one was Boasberg, of course. We all remember Boasberg. One unlawful order. This is the guy who ordered the plane full of Tren de Aragua guys who were being deported under Trump's Alien Enemies Act proclamation. The planes were mid-flight on their way to the tropical prison resort of Secot in El Salvador, and he ordered the planes turned around, and the planes were not turned around. And then the Supreme Court, because Trump appealed this order to the Supreme Court said, hey, Boasberg, you don't have any jurisdiction here. You have no jurisdiction in this case. So the order to turn the planes around was unlawful. So now what is Boasberg doing now? Boasberg, yesterday afternoon, held lengthy contempt hearings. He's planning to hold the Article 2 executive branch in contempt of court for failing to follow his order to turn around the planes in international airspace, even though the Supreme Court's already ruled that order was unlawful. He's trying to hold the executive branch in contempt for failing to follow his unlawful order. Remember how we started the show today with the little video of the Democrat traitors urging the military and intelligence communities that they don't have to follow lawless orders? Boasberg yesterday afternoon held a lengthy hearing on holding the president, the Article 2 executive branch, in contempt for their failure to follow his lawless order, ruled lawless by none other than the Supreme Court itself. More ridiculous shenanigans